Welcome to Innovation Out of Failure, where we talk to people about their careers and, most importantly, about the challenges they have faced that actually end up making them more successful innovators in the end. I am Andrew Lyon, Dean of the Fowler School of Engineering at Chapman University, and I'm your host for this series. This week we're speaking with Shirish Nadkarni. Shirish has had a remarkable career in the software industry, both for large companies and in small startups that turned out to become pretty big deals. All right, welcome to Innovation Out of Failure. Today I am joined by Shirish Nadkarni. Shirish, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
You've had a pretty remarkable career in the tech industry. My understanding is you started off really at Microsoft, but then took that experience lots and lots of different directions, be it education and also mobile email. Maybe you can share with the class a little bit about your path, where you started, and how you navigated to the place where you are right now.
You bet, yeah. So maybe just a little bit of history. I came to the United States in 1981 as a 20-year-old, so I was fairly young, and came to University of Michigan for my undergrad. I'd actually transferred to University of Michigan, finished my undergrad education, and I went to work in the Bay Area for a few years. From there, I went to business school, and then I joined Microsoft in 1987. Which was a pretty remarkable time to join Microsoft. In the very early days. They had about 1,500 employees at that point, so very small company. And this was in the days of MS-DOS. I don't know if students know what MS-DOS stands for today, but this was around MS-DOS 3.0, well before Windows made its appearance. But it was a remarkable time because the PC industry was in its very early stages of evolution, and I've been lucky to have seen different technology evolutions over time, and participate them. Starting from the PC revolution, then the internet, and then mobile devices, and now AI, machine learning technology. So it's been fascinating to see that evolution over time. So I joined Microsoft in a product management role. Worked on a variety of different initiatives, from email to development tools to finally, MSN. And I was responsible for driving the strategy for Microsoft on the internet. And in that context, did the acquisition of Hotmail, which was one of the biggest acquisitions at that time. Got Microsoft into the search business and launched MSN.com, which became one of the top 3 web portals. And then I decided to leave Microsoft. This was in the 99 timeframe, when the .com boom was at its height. I thought I'd give it a shot on my own to see if I could succeed on my own. And that started my entrepreneurial journey, which was a 15-year journey. I've done 3 different startups, had 2 exits out of that. I'm happy to talk more in detail, but just give you kind of arc of my my work.
So that step into entrepreneurship, what really drove that? Was that curiosity and excitement about the kind of boom that you were observing, or were there particular technologies that you were really interested in pushing forward, or maybe both?
Yeah, I'd say both. I had a lot of experience with email technologies. I had done the acquisition of Hotmail, and I saw kind of Hotmail was really the we talk about SaaS, or software as a service applications. Hotmail was the first example of a SaaS application, where instead of having a application running on your computer, it was all in the cloud. And so I said, hey, Hotmail was really successful. in the consumer space, what about business email? And at that time, Microsoft was selling something called Microsoft Exchange server, which required businesses to install, manage, and upgrade and backup. Go through all the hassle of setting up all these servers on their premises and manage it. And I said, why not apply the same model to business email and make it a cloud-based offering. So that was the germination of my first, startup. I felt excited about that opportunity. Number one. Number two, as I said, this was at the height of the .com boom, and I said, so far I've kind of ridden on the coattails of Microsoft. Let me see if I can do something on my own and see success on my own. So those are the two things that prompted me to start my first company.
So my understanding is that venture really rapidly grew, and you exited to Research in Motion. Is that correct, BlackBerry?
Yes. Actually, there's some, it wasn't quite a straightforward path. Talk about innovation and failure. I experienced both. So my initial concept, which was the small business email or business email in the cloud, didn't really work out because I was focused on small businesses because I thought need there was the strongest. And there was a lot of turmoil going on at that point because of the .com. The .com bust soon happened thereafter, and
Right.
that kind of drove the economy into a recession and so forth. So we didn't get quite the traction that I would have liked to have seen with this idea. And to some extent, it was ahead of its time. Now, you have Office 365, you have Google Apps, and the same concept now is available and very successful. But perhaps was a bit early in those days because broadband internet was not prevalent. So we decided to actually pivot to mobile email. And this was in the very early days of BlackBerry. There were some small number of people who were using BlackBerry. You now had mobile phones available that were could connect to the internet and access internet. And so we decided to pivot to mobile email, and we built a solution that would allow you to access any of your email accounts on your mobile device. And that ultimately became successful, and we were then acquired by Research in Motion, or BlackBerry, as it's known, and became part of the BlackBerry, technology.
So that pivot, making those changes can sometimes be really difficult and almost catastrophic for a small company that's, maybe in some cases only has 6 months of runway in terms of capital. Was it, how large was your team at that point, and how difficult was it getting everybody pushing in the same direction towards that initiative?
Well, fortunately, during the, I was able to raise money during the .com boom before the bust happened, and people were raising crazy amounts of money. So I raised about $15 million of funding, which is just an amazing amount of money, even in today's times. And about a year and a half after we had raised that money, we decided to make the pivot, and we downsized the company. It was a painful decision to let go of a number of our employees. We downsized, and we decided to refocus our energy on mobile. But fortunately, I had enough money in the bank left to continue for another 2 years as we worked on the pivot and developed the mobile technology, and then eventually got the exit with Research in Motion. But I was one of the few companies that were prudent with our funding. A lot of companies went bust at that time, as you may recall. because they were hiring, hundreds of employees and, taking, office space that was expensive and all of that. Excesses. I'm pretty conservative in spending my money, and so I had enough money to kind of work through the pivot and have a successful exit.
So you've also, from there, you moved into a space that was more along education and I believe, language learning, and that company, I believe, became part of Rosetta Stone eventually.
Yes.
So you've been involved now at this point in your career in really a serious number of innovations. What does that word mean to you now, right? How do you conceive of innovation, or how do you perceive innovation in that space?
In the education space, or in general, or both?
In general, I mean, I think that something we talk a lot about in this class is how overused that word is and how it sometimes loses a little bit of meaning. And so, what does it really mean to innovate?
Yeah, I mean, innovation can come in all kinds of forms. Innovation can happen with technology. We talked about Hotmail and how that was an innovation in its time. They didn't really invent email. They imagined email in a different architecture, right, where it was being deployed in the cloud. And so you could access your email from any location just using a browser, which is pretty simple, but far-reaching idea. Now, almost every application we use is through a web browser, right? So innovation can happen with technology. It can happen through reformulation of technology. Innovation can come in the form of business models. Amazon introduced Amazon Prime, as we all know and love, and that allowed Amazon to become the leader in e-commerce. So innovation can really take a variety.
Innovations, as a kind of consumer, we see the end result. We see, what's come out and what, as you said, has made our lives easier. But very often buried in there's lots of struggles. And you've already talked about some of the challenges that you've had in your career and how you came out the other end. In your opinion, what was your most important failure? Which failure informed the next step to the greatest degree, or allowed you to grow, let's say, as an entrepreneur to the greatest degree?
I would say with my first company, where I was convinced that there was an opportunity to provide host cloud-based business email, and somehow the traction didn't happen to the extent that we needed it to happen. And remember, I mean, we did reasonably well with that application. Don't get me wrong. But anytime you're venture funded, they need to see a real hockey stick. They need to see that you can be a $100 million business, and that wasn't happening for us. And so we had to kind of rethink our business and look at our assets, whatever technology we built, and see, can we redeploy it in any way that would allow us to succeed. And that's what we did. We had built technology to access a variety of different email systems, and fortunately for us, mobile devices were becoming data enabled or internet enabled, and we felt that people would want to access the email on their mobile devices, and so we were able to re-engineer our technology and take it in a different direction. Achieving product market fit is one of the most important tasks that any business can achieve. And that's one of the key lessons I've learned. I'm writing a book actually at this point about startups, and one of the first chapters I have in that book is about achieving product market fit. And getting to that point is a very difficult challenge, but it's something that you have to focus on. You have to have very narrow focus. You have to make sure that the problem, the solution you're providing is an aspirin, not a vitamin. You may have heard of that phrase, before. People want to solve, a pounding headache. They don't want to just, feel better. They want to address something that is really a pain point for them. So those were important lessons. So when today, I'm an angel investor now, I invest in companies and so forth. I really try to understand, is the solution an aspirin that somebody's building? Is there real proof of customer traction? Is there engagement, user engagement? Is that engagement growing rapidly? Those are the things I look for in determining whether I should invest in that company.
I'd like to rewind a little bit back to a point you made around a key to your success in that first startup, and that was being really kind of bringing a lot of wisdom to how you positioned that company. You didn't rent the fancy office space. You didn't hire hundreds of people and grow for the sake of growing. I feel like there's lots of examples now, again, in the current technology boom, where we're seeing that same mindset. As you advise companies and invest in companies, how much of that background do you bring to them in advising them and telling them about, really a wise and thoughtful approach to growth is going to win the day because it allows you to pivot much more in a much more sophisticated fashion?
Yeah. So what I tell companies is invest or spend your money wisely. Prove first of all that you have achieved product market fit. Track your user engagement metrics. See how well you are retaining and engaging users, and have a narrow focus. Don't try to, provide, be all to, be everything to everyone. That's a recipe for failure. And then once you have proven that you have, strong engagement, then you can work on the next piece of the puzzle, which is how to build a scalable sales model, how to acquire customers cost effectively, keep your costs down. So two things that I talk about is something called CAC and LTV, cost of customer acquisition, and lifetime value of a customer. And you want to make sure that you have a low cost of customer acquisition and a high LTV, and you want to typically see a ratio of 5-to-1 between LTV and CAC. And so very metrics oriented. And I tell the companies I work with to track these metrics. And once they have the sales engine understood, and it's a repeatable sales engine, then you can put more. So if for every dollar that you spend to acquire a customer, I'm going to get $5. That's a money-making machine. You can put more money into it, and you'll just keep, growing and growing, and you'll continue to raise, venture funding. So that's kind of the methodology that I recommend to the company to work with.
So one final question, again, reflecting upon something that you've said a number of times now, and that is, making sure that you've got good fit with the market. However, your your first company, you said, was maybe a little bit ahead of its time. It wasn't, the infrastructure wasn't really ready for the solution that you were providing. Now, as you advise entrepreneurs, what do you tell that entrepreneur who clearly has an awesome idea, but the idea is also clearly ahead of its time? It's an aspirin for a headache that hasn't occurred yet. How do you work with those companies to allow them to still be successful when you've got those really energetic, creative, brilliant innovators?
Yeah. So in that situation, it's important for them to really work with their customers and see how they are using the solution. What is it that is resonating with them? Maybe the whole solution is not attractive. Maybe a portion of the solution is attractive, and then pivot around whatever is making resonating with the customer. I mean, we have the example of Instagram. I certainly did not advise the Instagram founders, to be clear, but my understanding from the Instagram history is that they originally were like a check-in type app, like Foursquare, where you could check in into different stores or coffee shops or restaurants, etc. That was actually a crowded market. There are a number of players already doing something similar. But what they found was that people were taking pictures of the places that they were going to and then sharing that with their friends. And then they added the ability to add filters to your photos, and that really took off, and so forth. And so that formed the basis of their pivot, and that ultimately became what we know as Instagram. And so it's really paying attention to what is it that is resonating with your customers and pivoting around it, as opposed to trying to continue to force feed something that is clearly not resonating with the customers. Sometimes nothing resonates and you have to start all from scratch. I mean, the Slack example is a perfect example. They were in the gaming multiplayer game, didn't really get traction. They had still enough money. They had built an internal tool for messaging while they were working on their multiplayer game, and decided to take that and make that into Slack, right? So there was no customer feedback, but there was some other technology that they had built that formed the foundation of a very successful company. So it's really paying attention to your customers and what's resonating, and then don't be afraid to pursue a very narrow path. It may seem narrow to you because they're customers resonating with only one feature, but that could form the basis of a very successful company. So don't be afraid of going where the customer needs you.
So with that, we're out of time, and I think that's a perfect way to end, right? It's a really, allowing the students to recognize that focus pays dividends, and not being too broad in your approach, that diversification can happen later. I want to thank you for your time today. This has been fascinating. I've loved hearing about your story, and best of luck with the book. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Okay, thank you very much. I loved, enjoyed the interview. Thank you very much. Yeah, all the best.
Thanks. Bye now. I'd like to thank Shirish for taking the time to join us today to share some stories, and also thanks to you for listening to Innovation Out of Failure. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I also hope you'll check out all of my other interviews with amazing innovators. Once again, my name is Andrew Lyon, and thank you for listening.